Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So we're gonna try something different from now on with this channel, a little bit different, which is basically me talking more raw. I might even be talking while I'm going on a hike or a run because I kind of want to optimize my time. I don't have a lot of time to just keep filming directly like that. So I don't know if you guys gonna like this, but you know, this is how it's gonna go. So today we're gonna be talking about Singapore's fertility rate. Just recently we saw that it went down to 0.87. They were talking about this in Parliament. Gan Kim Yong was talking about how we are basically cooked, okay? Singapore's population is cooked, okay? We're going at zero. That was probably a YouTube hook.
Reality is that I think even at 0.97 or even at 1, we are actually below 50% of replacement rate. And that is not good news anyway. So whatever TFR that we have, I think we are going to have very low birth rates, and the number of babies that we produce will not be enough to replace ourselves, which means that if you do nothing, the Singapore citizen core will begin to shrink after a while.
But, you know, I'm going to talk about why we need babies. I know a lot of tech entrepreneurs and big billionaires are talking about how we need babies. And I want to say a lot of this is also due to them needing a larger workforce. But what they're doing is the complete opposite. You see recently, right, with Jack Dorsey, he's laying off people in block. So he had laid off like 40% of his workforce, and despite that, the stock prices went up. So what's this trying to tell us? It's trying to tell us that, you know, humans are becoming obsolete, AI is taking over, automation is taking over a lot of jobs, and at the same time, layoffs apparently are good for the stock market. So they don't really care. Like, the billionaires don't care about us.
Hey, Leslie. So this is one of the most dramatic restructurings that we have seen in tech. Block cutting 40% of its staff of 10,000, and CEO Jack Dorsey is directly attributing the move to AI. On the earnings call last night, he called this a fundamental shift in how you build and run a company.
Oh, hoo-ha, like big like news to us, right? Like, it's not something surprising, okay? But why does this really matter? First, I'm going to talk about like the math of Singapore's fertility rate, okay? Where we are at now, we are already at like top 3 lowest, okay? That's not even a good thing. Singapore right now is just behind South Korea and Taiwan, okay? And previously, we were behind Japan quite a bit while ago. But like I said in my previous few videos, I think Japan is finally doing something structurally different. They are actually hiking rates. And because they're hiking rates, people think of this as a bad thing at first. But technically, they're actually caring about their citizens more. They're realizing that they're not going to be a footstool to the rest of the world. They're not going to keep their currency cheap so people can borrow in yen and invest in high-yield US assets and whatnot. They are finally giving a shit. And I think that's something that needs to be changed. But a lot of these policies don't change. The reason why a lot of government don't really care about the young people is because, like it or not, we are one of the smallest, we are the smallest group in terms of the population size, right? The preponderance of voters that are eligible to vote are older. And the people in parliament are also geriatrics. There's a system called gerontocracy or something like that. And it means that most of the people in power are elderly. You look at, there was this meme that said that, like, you know, the last 3-4 presidents on the US were of the same age. So Donald Trump is actually the same age as like George W. Bush, and Donald Trump is actually the same age as Biden. So basically, they're all the same age, something like that. And what this goes to show is that, you know, the people in power are just older, so they also cater to an elderly population. It's a thing that's happening right now called like populist. You know, being a populist is catering to everybody, making sure everybody likes you, and that's how they get into power. But that's also the real danger, because nobody really cares for the youth. They are taking more debt, you know, which is not going to be serviced. The interest payments on the US debt, even everywhere across the world, it's sky high. And if they don't service this debt, you know who's going to pay for it? The working population. And who are supposed to be the working population? The younger generation. But the problem with this is that we are getting a shrinking younger generation, a shrinking workforce. That's why the billionaires are encouraging you to have kids. That's also why we have an inverted population pyramid, right? And the issue with this is that if we don't actually raise our fertility rate, they're just going to say, we're going to bring in more migrants. And that's what, I guess, the liberal government wants. There's left-wing and right-wing politics in the US. It's not so much here in Asia and in Singapore. But you can even see in Asia, there's so much resentment and dissent going on. Because even the young people are starting to realize, hey, this is not right. Most people are not educated economically and politically. But when you see the price of your food going up, people start to get interested or like, what is going on? And because of that, you can see so much Gen Z protests going on. A lot of people don't really know the economics behind these things, and I won't even claim to know myself. I'm just someone that likes to read about it. But you can see that they're just not happy with they know that they can't afford anything, and this is something that bites your wallet no matter your education level, right? No matter your socio-economic status, you will realize that things are not getting cheaper. There is shrinkflation going on, there's inflation going on, there's stagflation going on, there's unemployment going on, and because of that, we're just all not happy. And that's how we dissent, right? We're saying we're not gonna have kids anymore. But that's also the problem. Kids are like the lifeblood of society. From how I look at things, right? I just came back from Japan. I saw that in the outskirts of Japan, you barely see any kids, because they're all centralized inside Tokyo, Osaka, the capital areas. And you see with everywhere else, it's just all elderly people. And that's also why it's very sad, because you lose this hope for the new generation. You lose this lifeblood of society. You don't really feel any more hope. You just want to keep things going. And that's not how a society should live. If we don't really care for our future, then we're just waiting for the clock to tick out for the rest of us, right? That's also why I'm also a natalist. I believe that we should have kids. As for myself, I can't say I can't say I'm a natalist if I don't have kids myself. I mean that's a argument for another time. But I think a lot of younger people will relate with me. It's not because we don't want kids. It's literally the point that we can't afford kids. For me, you can see a lot of my friends are freezing eggs right now. And for me, myself, I feel like I don't even think I'm bad off in society. I did whatever the government told me to do. I went to school, I studied hard, I tried to get a good job. I think I'm actually above average pay, and generally, I don't think I'm doing that bad for myself. But even I am feeling the pinch of how am I supposed to offer a kid when it's going to cost $500,000 or $1 million to raise them to adulthood. It just doesn't make sense anymore. And when you look at the fertility rate right now, let's say I do a technical analysis on it, okay? If you do a technical analysis chart on the fertility rate, we saw it go down years and years and years, and then there was this short blip, during COVID. It went extremely low, and then it went a short blip up. But the short blip up could be attributed to because it's the dragon year. People thought it's more auspicious, although young people don't really care about that anymore. And also because after COVID ended, a lot of people started resuming their marriage and their life goals. And then that's why you saw a short blip up in terms of marriage. And then after that, it went all the way back down. So right now, Singapore is at an all-time low. Something I found really interesting, I hope my editor can put this into a short, but something I found really interesting about the top 3 lowest fertility rate countries, right, is that they all have conscription. And they are all Asian countries, and they all have some form of dissent between genders. There's some form of gender war going on. So let's talk about conscription first. Why is conscription an attributing factor? Obviously, it is not a direct factor for low fertility rate, but it's an accelerator. What conscription does, it gives you a later start to the workforce, right? And because of that, right, you start earning money later. Your peers and the women in society will feel like these guys are starting later off. They are not as financially sound. They are not as attractive because, if you look in the whole disparity between female and males, females look a lot about status and whether a guy can provide, and then guys just look whether they're good looking. So that's how men and female are, male and women are thinking differently. But we'll go into that another time. So one aspect is conscription. But you see, between Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, which are the top 3 lowest fertility rates, we do conscription differently. Okay, when you look at Korea, they actually have an opposing threat that is like arming nuclear missiles. We have North Korea. And you look at Taiwan, you have China actively knocking on their doors, threatening them through international waters. But you look at Singapore, why are we still having this 2-year conscription when Malaysia and us are pretty chill? I think it's a bit backward. I can understand South Korea and I can understand Taiwan trying to increase their conscription length. But among these countries, Singapore is one of the longest conscription terms. We have 1 year and 10 months. So I think these things need to be reworked. I know they're talking about reworking conscription and national service in Singapore. They're talking about, not being pest discriminatory in terms of like whether someone is fit, they can still contribute. Even if they're not fit, they can contribute in a service role or in terms of another kind of non-combat unit role. Because nowadays, if you think about it, how is war going to be conducted in the next 10 years? War is not going to be like a draft and then they're going to bear arms and then it's going to be the conventional kind of fighting. War is going to be fought by drones and a lot of diplomacy and democracy, which is entirely different from how it used to be constructed. So when we look at conscription being one of the factors, it's really an accelerator to this low fertility rate problem. So the second point here, it also ties into the third point, is that these top three countries with the lowest birth rates are all Asian countries. And the third point is that there's a gender war. Why does Asian countries and gender war have a correlation? Because Asian countries tend to have a high savings culture. We're a bit more traditional, but it's also very polarizing because we have influences from the West right now, right? And when you look at a gender war, you can see in South Korea, there was the whole presidents fighting each other over different terms. There is the 4B movement. They overthrew President Moon. That whole hoo-ha that went down with that. And it's the same thing in Singapore right now. People are saying that Singaporean girls, Korean girls are too materialistic. And then the guys just don't want to provide anymore. And then basically, we just all give up. So people are just giving up on dating. And I think the solution to this, I'm not going to always talk about problems, is that Singapore needs more third spaces. Look at how much we made in terms of revenue. Like our surplus was crazy last year for Singapore, at least, right? They were talking about this. Pritam Singh was talking about this a couple days back about how Singapore had a budget surplus. And although this surplus is just getting back what we lost during COVID, how much they spend in terms of their handouts, I still think it can be used effectively. Okay, they should stop. I think they should stop subsidizing the elderly. I know it's a very unpopular opinion here, but I'm not someone that votes for sanicide or making the elderly life suffer. But to be fair, right, the elderly had their whole generation, the boomers had the whole generation on the whole lifetime to accumulate wealth, and they should have already, okay? Because in the past, housing was seen as an investment and not as a place to stay. And if you bought any kind of housing, they'll be asset rich by now. So I'm gonna say something out here that is probably unpopular, but I think we should probably give less care and concern to the elderly, okay? And start contributing more towards youth development. And this can be done in a few ways. One is to increase more third spaces, right? We can see that run clubs and a lot of these bars and clubs are changing. When I went to Vietnam a couple months back, I saw that the club culture is dying, but there's a cafe culture. People are going for ice bars, youths are eating and drinking out there, and I think that's a great thing. So more third spaces, right? And another thing they can do is also, of course, make raising a kid not so difficult. And I'm not saying give a baby bonus, okay? At least maybe subsidize the cost of childbirth more, okay? Make primary school, secondary school, give more subsidies to your Singaporean citizens who actually serve NS and who actually did their duty, instead of just increasing immigration. Because you can see, right, that the fertility rate is a direct indicator of the unhappiness within the Singapore population. They are unhappy about rising cost of living, they're unhappy about inflation, and that's why they're not giving birth. Just bringing in migrants is just going to plug the problem. It's not giving a solution. So the real solution, I think, is to increase third spaces, make having kids not such a barrier, reduce the barrier to entry to having kids. Of course, this is all easier said than done. I'm not a politician. I'm just someone yapping in the car. But, I think the real solution here is, if you really want to make a difference, right, as a young individual, if you're watching this, it is not by, revolting and saying, I'm not going to have kids because the system is against me. It's by trying to make structural and political change by putting yourself out there, putting your opinions out there, and also just voting for change, telling them that, enough is enough, in some ways. You can vote with your wallet, you can talk to your MPs, you can like this video, you can just try and raise more discourse and talk about this situation, because I think the last thing we need to do is just keep quiet and just not have kids. I think we should at least encourage that. Yeah, anyway, that's my 2 cents. I probably didn't do this video as well as I thought, because I'm actually just freestyle yapping for once. Normally I plan this out a lot better, but today we're just gonna wing it. Anyway, As always, if you like this sort of video, do remember to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below what you think. If you agree, if you disagree, you think I'm stupid, you think I didn't read this enough, which maybe I didn't because, like I said, I'm just talking in a car. But we'll see you guys next time. Bye!